My name is Troels Linde. I'm here to give you a brief introduction and some background on the concept of Animotion. It's almost impossible to talk about Animotion without also mentioning the startup company Rokoko and the journey that they have been on ever since back in the day at the National Film School when the idea originally formed. The two guys, Peter Madegaard and Jakob Bertslev, were the founding fathers of the concept. It all began with Peter Madegaard's ambition or idea to revive the theatre format of Commedia dell'arte in a new shape that he called Cinema dell'arte. They called it Cinema dell'arte because they wanted to integrate active participation and improvisation with the cinematic experience. And that became the starting point of the journey that has taken them to the point where they are today.
Creative Business Cup in slags VM.
So an important milestone on that journey was when they entered the Creative Business Cup, a competition for young startups that they won at national level. This was prior to any technological advances, so it was really the creative concept that they entered the competition with. And from that point forward, the world began opening up to them. It was the same time as Peter and Jacob left the film school. And they moved into a modest office and began an actual business. They got lots of new ideas, they got a lot of feedback, very positive feedback. And the first proof of concept was when they started a project together with the Tivoli Gardens in Copenhagen. It was based on The Little Mermaid, where she was trapped at the bottom of the sea in the shape of the big aquarium in the Tivoli Gardens, and couldn't get out without the help of the children who came to visit her. The Little Mermaid project was thought of as an edutainment title, but it was so entertaining that the kids came back again and again. So essentially, they collaborated with her in order to fulfill or complete her mission, and in that way set her free. However, one of the experiences that came from this early attempt was the technology needed to improve. They had chosen to abandon the technology that they used back at the film school because it was too big, too clunky. So the big question became, what lies ahead then? What is the next step? How do we expand this concept? How do we bring it out to all sorts of venues? And that became the starting point for a research and development process that really came from Anders Klock, one of the founding members of Rokoko. He got the idea to use already existing mobile technology and combine that into a sensor system that they called the Salto sensor system, and then rig that onto a suit. So basically what you would get was a full motion capture, but as a wearable suit. So with these two things, the Animotion concept on one hand and this idea for the novel technology on the other hand, was the inspiration for the Kickstarter campaign that Rokoko launched back in 2015.
We have invented a unique sensor-based motion capture suit. We named it Salto. Our journey started at the National Film School of Denmark when we got an idea. We wanted to make live animation theater, our very own motion capture suit, built out of motion sensors like those you have in your smartphone. Here's how Salto works. The Salto sensor nodes are attached directly to the suit. The data from each sensor is collected by the hub and transmitted through Wi-Fi or cable to the computer or smart device. If you know how to put on your clothes, you'll know how to set up the Salto suit. It's intuitive, it's mobile, but most importantly, the price of it makes it accessible to everybody.
So when they introduced this idea of kickstarting their new technology on this platform, lots of other people took interest. And this is where they got the venture capital that propelled them forward to the position that they are today. The focus changed a little bit. More emphasis was put on getting the suit ready for market. But that's not to say that Animotion had to take a step backwards, because at the same time, a new show was in production.
Farverne tilbage. I så lang tid var de væk.
Og mørket råbte ud nord, men den vilde storm er stillet af.
The evolution of Animotion also gained new momentum by the interest it received from the Nordic Film Foundation. The answers that are surfaced are compiled in the report issued in conjunction with this little film. The conclusions of the report are based upon experiences from 5 shows: The Princess and the Frog, The Little Mermaid, The Planet of Secrets, H.C. Andersen Lives, and most recently How the Ghost Story. In the beginning, the technology was still in its infancy, and the research often explored ways for getting practical issues right. So one way to answer the question, what is Animotion, is to try and break it down into its main components. And one of these components is always a performer or actor, who is always wearing a smart suit. Because the smart suit is what makes it possible to capture the movements of the actor. These movements are then transmitted and mounted onto a 3D or virtual character on a screen. Obviously, we want to hear what the actor is saying, so he's also wearing a microphone that is then transmitted and amplified and sent out through a speaker system, so that the audience can see and hear what is going on. With that, we now have established a communication line from the performer or actor via the screen to the audience. But because of the nature of Animotion, we also need to have communication going back to the actor. The way we do that is, first of all, by placing discreetly cameras so that the performer can see the audience. They can even pinpoint different members of the audience and talk directly to them. And for that, they need to have a monitor so that they can see clearly what is going on. Now, because it's dialogue based, there needs to be a microphone so that the performer can hear what the audience is saying.
Til nogen i hele universet.
But what we come to realize is that it's actually also a very good idea for the actor to be able to see and feel the mood of the room. So what we do is that we also place cameras behind the audience so that the performers can see what is going on in the room as such. That of course requires its own monitor. So to work with Animation is for many people a completely new experience. Most people have never tried anything like this before. When we began work on the H.C. Andersen show, we knew we would be working in a bigger team with more people and new types of competencies. So we decided this was the time to answer the question, what is Animotion, from a more conceptual angle. In order to support development of content for Animotion, we developed this method, ensuring a unified progression of the Animotion experience, which means that the story, the interaction between performers and audience, and the social evolution, or group dynamics if you like, of the experience must go hand in hand. The idea behind the framework is to give a development team the ability to answer two basic questions. The first question to answer is, what do we want to achieve with our audience? The next question is, how do we want to do that? The journey towards these answers begins by understanding the focus point of the framework. The first column addresses the narrative of the experience. Because it's not up for debate if there will be a narrative, there will be. Nor is it relevant to discuss if the story should be structured according to a dramaturgy, because it should. Essentially, you can use any kind of dramaturgical model that you choose. We use the 8-sequence model. Important note, this is mainly to get an early overview. So for each act and each sequence, you can say this is the intended effect. These are the progression points of the narrative. Different parts of the storyline are translated into the moods and tempers that we want the audience to experience. The point to that is that we want to be able to measure our input to the show, which is almost always story-driven, with the output of the show, which is the effect it has on the audience. So to take a first step in that direction, we use the first two columns to answer the what do we want type of questions in terms of input. And then the two columns to the far right to answer the what do we want question in terms of output or effect on the audience. The middle columns are where things become more detailed and more concrete. They provide a long list of answers to the how do we do it question. But one of the risks of going column by column left to right is that there is a potential risk that when you get to the group dynamics, it doesn't necessarily match what you intend. So if you imagine that you could take your Excel sheet and kind of fold it in the middle, so you could focus only on the input and the result, then you get a much stronger measuring point at the very beginning of the development process. So you can say, this is the story that we're telling, and this is how we see that affecting the audience and their collaboration with the actors on screen. So really, the questions to answer are, when do we move from one stage to the next? And how do we make that happen? And just to give you an example, the first sequences of the H.C. Andersen show all belong to the forming stage. The audience was invited into the room by the actor, playing the part of H.C. Andersen, who told him about his miserable life, but when the shadow behind him came to life, things began to happen. This was when we began the process of wheeling the audience into the show. It was easy for them to engage, and there were no competitive elements, because those we reserved for the storming stage. Getting a bit more specific, we can take a look at the progress targets. This column is where the moods we want to create with the story are stated. Staying with the H.C. Andersen example, we knew we wanted the audience to be empathetic with H.C. We knew we had to outline the stages of the world that we were bringing them into. We also knew that the audience would be in a state of shyness mixed with anticipation. So the question to answer was, what mood do we want to begin with? We went for sad. So HC told the children about his humiliating casting at the Royal Theatre, where he was made fun of. We intended the audience to feel empathy with HC, but we also wanted to evoke a growing impatience. We wanted to make the audience feel ready for action. And it worked. When the instigating moment occurred and the shadow of the ugly duckling came alive behind HC, we progressed to a mood of magic and wonder. The children were on board and ready for interaction. Looking horizontally across the board, we had instigating moment in the dramaturgy column, magic and wonder as our progression target, and curiosity as the emotion that we wanted the kids to have as part of their forming process. So, what actions did we want to employ in order to bridge these components? Well, these how do we want to do it type of questions were now fairly clear cut, because it was defined what we had to achieve with them and all the requirements were set. The storyline reached the instigating moment, the kids helped HC spot the shadow, they took part in his chase of it, and they loved the transition from slight impatience to active participation in a magic moment. Obviously, this is still work in progress and it needs to be evolved. Work on the Hamlet ghost story represented yet another opportunity for us. An opportunity to push the envelope of the Animotion concept in terms of the technical challenges it offers, as well as the artistic exercise it required. No use of language was the first hurdle to jump. Staging a show outdoors at the Kronborg Castle and using a big reflective mirror as the screen was another interesting experience to harvest. We are inviting anyone from everywhere to use the animation concept for whatever they can. It's an open invitation to share ideas and knowledge.